Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Love is reciprocal. You cannot love someone if they don't love you. I mean, you can in the short term, but over the long term, it becomes necessary for it to become a two-way street, or else the relationship cannot last. You can have compassion for someone if they don't love you, and you can even be willing to help them, but that affectionate, devoted willingness to sacrifice to an extreme degree, that is what we call love. And that quality, that devotion, that affection, that willingness to sacrifice everything or almost everything for someone, that quality cannot exist without there being some kind of strong reciprocation on the part of the other person. This applies to romantic relationships, friendships, etc. Trust is absolutely foundational when it comes to relationships of all kinds, but trust is not everything. Trust underlies everything, but it is not everything. Affection, devotion, willingness to sacrifice for each other, understanding, patience, etc. These qualities are also very important to have in a serious relationship, whether a romantic relationship or a friendship or even a business relationship. If you don't have affection for each other, then you will not work as well together. If you don't both have devotion, then the business partnership will eventually split up. If you don't have patience, then you'll not be able to get along with each other. If you're not willing to sacrifice for each other, for the business, then the business will not be able to grow, etc. And like I said, these things apply to not just business, but friendships and romantic relationships too. Men can no longer love women these days because women don't love men. In the past, women loved men, or at the very least acted like they loved men. That is, they worked hard, they were faithful, they spoke and behaved in a respectful way to their husbands, they obeyed their husband's commands, they had sex with him when he wanted to, they defended him and his reputation. Women back then tried to make peace instead of trouble. Plus, women of the past were pair bonded to their husband. They sexually imprinted their husband, or he imprinted her. However you want to phrase it, she was permanently shaped by him because he was her first sexual partner. Her husband, took her virginity. So that made her love him, and so she really did love her husband, women back in the past. So women really did love their husbands in a large percentage of marriages. I'm not going to say in all marriages, because I don't know if women can pair bond with their husband when they have sex with their husband for the first time, and when they lose their virginity to their husband, if they're not able to have a vaginal orgasm. I'm not sure if they can actually pair bond with him that way. So maybe those women who cannot have vaginal orgasms, are not able to pair bond. Or maybe they can only pair bond by their husband, having oral sex with them, or, rubbing their clit or whatever, and only if they themselves have never masturbated. Maybe that's the case. For those women being able to pair bond, women who can't have vaginal orgasms. I'm not sure. But I would assume that most women who lost their virginity to their husband, especially if they could have vaginal orgasms, did fall in love with him, right? Especially if he was a good person, right? Like most men in society were. And especially if they they had a sort of rapport to where they got along fairly well. Like, I'm sure there was a certain percentage of marriages, I don't know, 1%, 30%, I have no idea what the percentage would be, but I'm sure in the past, in arranged marriages, or especially in arranged marriages, there's probably a certain percentage of them where they just were not suited to each other at all. Their personalities did not mesh well together at all, and thus, they didn't get along that well for their whole lives, even though she lost her virginity to him, right? That was probably the case. But I would say that was a minority of cases, right? Even if the woman was only a little bit in sync with him, like not good chemistry, just a little bit of chemistry, as long as he took her virginity and she was able to have vaginal orgasms, then I'm sure they had a pretty decent marriage, right? Back in the past, let's say 100, 200 years ago and earlier. But now, because of women's horrific behavior over the last several decades, men can no longer love women. Men are refusing to take care of women because there's no reason to take care of women and love women if they don't love us, if they don't reciprocate, right? If they're not faithful, if they're not hardworking, if they're not affectionate, if they're not patient, if they're not devoted, etc. And as a response, women are getting concerned and are trying to improve the female gender as a whole by telling women that they should adhere to certain standards of behavior. And they're doing this because women cannot survive if men all walk away from women. Women will be prostituting themselves by the millions if all single men walk away from all women. And this is a concern for happily married men too, because their daughters will then have no prospects for marriage and children. And a woman wants to be able to get grandkids a wife does. She wants her daughter to be able to have kids, and so she's concerned about the rise of MGTOW too, even though she's happily married. If you love someone without demanding that they love you back, then you're just asking to be used, abused, taken for granted, etc. You have to get reciprocal behavior from the other person, or else you cannot continue the relationship. They don't have to give you exactly what you give them, but they have to be willing to give you as much or almost as much as you give them, although what they give you might be different. Right? Like, in other words, a relationship is supposed to be some kind of trade relationship, whether it's a business relationship, a marriage, or just a dating relationship, or a friendship, or whatever it is. It's supposed to be reciprocal in some way, right? So this is important to realize. In other words, a relationship is supposed to be some kind of trade, right? Like, you give them something and they give you something else back. You make the woman more heavy, like in like seriousness, right? Like, a guy can make a woman more heavy. He benefits her in that way, right? It makes her more interested in the long-term consequences of her actions, and she makes the guy lighter, happier, more able to enjoy the moment. You give her a roof over her head and food and clothing, and she gives you sex, devotion, affection, comfort, advice, etc. And she cleans, cooks, and gives you children and takes care of your children the way that you tell her to. She raises the children the way that you tell her to. You take care of her, and she takes care of you in a certain way, or at least she takes care of your kids for you. Of course, what you do is more important because it is the foundation of everything else. She could not do it without you. And a large percentage of the women who claim to be doing things on their own without a man are still receiving help from their neighbors or parents or siblings or the government or whatever. So even then, they're actually getting men's help, because maybe the woman who's helping her take care of her kids is getting taken care of by a man. So then it's still indirectly help from a man. Women always get help from a man unless they're single and working and have no kids, right? What men do for women is far more important than what women do for men. So men and women are not of equal value. Men have more value than women do, which is why men can walk away. Because women need men, but men don't need women. They just do not need women, right? But women absolutely do need men, no matter how much they pretend like they don't. Ashley Elisa even admitted that women need relationships more than men do, as Karen Strawn also admits. So men have the largest responsibility and provide the most important service. And in exchange, men get more authority, more power. And if men do not get that, then men walk away and allow women and civilization to fall on its face. But the point is that it's reciprocal. Women provide far less than they think they provide, especially since women these days provide sex and little else. But the women of the past actually did a lot for men. They were real women. But women these days are not real women because they do not provide men with much at all. They do not allow the relationship to be reciprocal. And if a relationship is not reciprocal, then it doesn't work. MGTOW really is men on strike. And men will stay on strike for as long as need be. Even men will stay on strike all the way until they die. And men as a whole will stay on strike until women all are utterly prostituting themselves by the tens of millions. It doesn't matter. Women have to cave, or else this strike will not end. Now, maybe women will deceive men into, taking them back in some mitigated way or whatever, because all the blue pillers will be fooled. But, red pill men are never going to not be red pilled. They're never going to take women back unless they move to another country where they actually have authority, or unless, society in America or a Western country that's misandric that they live in, unless that society changes, men are not going to stop going MGTOW. That's just how it's going to be. The strike is never going to end until women change and until women or until government changes, or until men and women force the abolishment of government, right? There's going to have to be some major change before men stop this strike, right? This is not a temporary strike. This strike is not a bluff, etc. This strike is serious, and this is going to go on as long as it needs to go on, even if it takes 100 years. Seriously, right? MGTOW's, and if MGTOW never gets and men will stay on strike for as long as need be, and if MGTOW never gets popular, if MGTOW always stays a very small minority of the male population, then MGTOW will retain its appeal, because society will stay screwed up, and MGTOW men will be able to continue getting sex for little or nothing. But if MGTOW gets huge, then it will lose its appeal because of losing the ability to get sex easily, because of MGTOW men having incentivized women to keep their legs closed as leverage. But this increased female sexual restraint will actually be very good for society. So either way, whether MGTOW gets huge or whether it doesn't, either way, it's necessary for men to go MGTOW, and good things will happen because of MGTOW having arisen. You know, it'll be good for either the MGTOW men in a fucked up society where MGTOW remains the minority, or it'll be good for all of society when MGTOW gets big and forces women to start keeping their legs closed. Either way, it's good for either society or for MGTOW men. You know, MGTOW will either grow and force women to give up all their rights and completely change all their behavior, or MGTOW will stay small and things will not improve in society, but the small number of men who are MGTOW will be enjoying a relatively safe life, where they keep their expenses low, they avoid the stress of relationships with rebellious women, they get sex for little or nothing, and they enjoy their lives while amassing wealth. When the problem of abuse and or neglect gets so bad that the other person in a relationship, whether a business partnership or a friendship or a romantic relationship, when the abuse or neglect gets so bad that the other person finally bails, even though that person is a very devoted, loving, fair, generous person, then that person will not be brought back very quickly or easily. Men, at least wise men who know female nature and or have experience with divorce rape, are not going to just take women back once women change their behavior. Women will not just have to change. Women will have to prove that they have changed and that the change is permanent. I heard another MGTOW man's video say that this problem of men having to go MGTOW now has been decades in the making, right? Women have been crucifying men for decades, and it will take decades of females trying to undo the problem before they'll be able to get men back. I heard another MGTOW man say that in his video, and he might be correct. I'm not sure if he is, but he might be. And if he's correct, then it'll be because the male sex drive is very strong, and younger generations are the ones with the highest sex drives. And they will be born into a world where women only reform themselves a few years earlier, and thus these men will hear about divorce rape, but they might not see it. They might not see much of the divorce rate, right? Because of women having changed their behavior in order to save themselves by stopping men from walking away, right? These men who grow up in this screwed up world or this world that is a little screwed up, that was only newly reformed, and partially reformed, these men will have a hard time believing that female nature is as dark as it is. I mean, just look at how deluded most men are these days. And that's despite the fact that female evil is pretty much on full display already. So what I'm saying is that maybe it will not take decades for women to trick men into taking them back. Oh, did I say all that? I think I screwed up on writing that. But basically what happens is that could happen, right? Like the sex drive is strong. The younger generations won't see women for as bad as they are after women reform themselves, at least somewhat. Right, so this will mean that they won't see how evil women are. They'll be tricked into taking women back, and this will, promote gynocentrism, right? This will promote, this whole believe women thing, and this will make it so that MGTOW will stay small or whatever, right? Or MGTOW will become more popular once women continue to act badly and word gets out to the populace in a bigger way. I mean, there's various ways it could go, right? There's something that a certain martial artist said. It might have been like an 80-year-old woman martial arts master. I can't remember. But anyway, the martial arts master said, quote, "No one can resist non-resistance," unquote. That's a powerful quote. It's very true. Women live by that principle, or at least they used to, and they still partially do. And they will completely live by that principle again in the future once they're forced to go back to being feminine and submissive again. So once women change and stop resisting men, then it will be hard for men to take back power, right? But then again, I suppose any resistance that women show will just reveal their rebellious nature, right? But a complete lack of resistance against men's will, against men's demands, will enable men to remold women and make women what they should be, what they used to be. That is, faithful, disciplined, hardworking, submissive, etc. So I guess either way, men will win. But men have to be aggressive enough to demand complete obedience from women and really push women's boundaries in terms of obedience. Because what a woman today would consider to be obedient, a man of, 150 years ago would be considered to be rebellious, right? So we have to push women to be super obedient. If women's obedience is not tested, then women can just retain their innate stubbornness, their feminist rebelliousness, and they'll just pretend to be obedient most of the time, right? But then when it really comes when push comes to shove, and they really don't agree with their man, they'll still be rebellious, right? So we have to push them to be super obedient, and we have to test them and make sure they're obedient, right? Only if men use the opportunity of women caving to remold women completely and make women into something completely different than what they currently are. Only then will men be able to win a victory over feminism. But if men just settle for just letting women go back to their 1950s role, then women will retain their bad qualities. Only if men put women under like Sharia or white Sharia or, the story of O level of slavery. I assume you've read that book because I've recommended it before. You got to read that book, The Story of O. It is absolutely revelatory in terms of the aspects of female nature that it reveals, and I think you'll learn a lot about women from reading it. So that level of slavery, like the story of O, or like white Sharia, or like Islamic Sharia, that level of slavery, only if we put women under that level of slavery will men be able to tell if women have truly caved, have truly become obedient and submissive and faithful, or whether women are just kind of faking it, right? And if under that level of slavery women prove that they're still utterly obedient, submissive, faithful, etc., then and only then will men be able to maybe start trusting women a little bit again. Enough to maybe give women a little bit of freedom so that we end up with, like, let's say a 1940s, 1950s level of freedom. Women could then be given a little more freedom so that they have the amount of freedom that women had in the 1940s or 50s. Although perhaps that would be a mistake, because if you give women an inch, then they'll just take a mile. Right? And then it will be feminism all over again. So perhaps men should put women under a Sharia-style story of O level of slavery and then never let them out of it again. Because only when women are strictly controlled are women very well behaved. But then again, not all women are super malleable, and that's okay. Most women are super malleable if they're under the control of a strict man in a strict society, but not all women are super malleable. Some women are just naturally more like guys, right? So while most women respond very well to being extremely enslaved, almost to the point where the more pressure you put on them, the more demanding of them you are, the more strictly you control them, the more obedient they are, the more happy they are, the more devoted they are. So it's almost like you cannot, enslave women too much. There's no such thing as enslaving women too much, right? For those women. But, that small percentage of women who are more like guys, that's not going to be the case for them, right? Like, the more you oppress those kind of women, that small minority of women, the more miserable they'll be, right? Some women are not like that, to where the more you enslave them, the happier they are. And thus perhaps a 1940s, 50s level of freedom is better, because it keeps women controlled, and it keeps them relatively powerless, but it also allows them a comfortable level of freedom, and it also allows the women who are less malleable, the women who are more like men, it still allows them to feel free enough to where they don't snap and go psycho, and I don't know what they would do, become feminists or whatever, right? Men should not strictly control women out of a sense of sadism, but should do so, or out of a sense of male ego. But men should only restrain women out of a need to keep her controlled because she needs to be controlled, and partly out of a desire to make her and himself happy, because both the man and the woman are happy when he is controlling her, when he is dominant, when he holds her to account, when he places demands on her and punishes her if she disobeys or neglects to accomplish what he demands of her. Assuming his demands are reasonable, which his demands should be. The main rule is that men should be as hard on women as men can be without being too demanding of women, right? That is, men should demand that women be as subservient and obedient and submissive as women can possibly be. But he should not demand anything from her that she is incapable of doing, because that's just cruel and oppressive to expect someone to do something that they're not capable of doing, right? And since women's memory, submissiveness, obedience, etc., since a woman's qualities like that vary from woman to woman, this means that a man must gauge how his particular woman is and what he is capable of pushing her to do. What would be reasonable for him to expect from her, right? He should only expect as much obedience from her as she is able to give. Although she probably thinks that she's capable of a lot less obedience than she is actually capable of. So he has to figure it out himself. He cannot, do so by like consulting with her, because then it'll just be her manipulating her. It'll just be her manipulating him, and her thinking that she can be less obedient than she's actually capable of. So he has to push her boundaries in terms of forcing her to be more obedient than she thinks she's able to be, right? He has to push her boundaries to get her to change and to get her to realize that she is a lot more capable of utter obedience than she thought she was, right? She's way more capable of obedience and submissiveness than she thinks she is, right? But once he finds her true limits, then he should respect those limits and not try to push her past those limits, because even a woman. Even malleable women have limits, right? As to how far you can expect them to obey, and how far you can expect them to remember every little detail of what you expect them to do, and what she's expected to accomplish every day. I mean, there's only so many hours in the day, so even a super submissive woman can only accomplish so much in a day, right? So time and energy and memory and submissiveness are limited, and thus a man should expect no more from his woman than what she is capable of doing. She cannot have a sense of obedience to him if he's always expecting her to do things that are beyond her capacity to do. So she's going to be more devoted if he does not try to make her more devoted than she's actually capable of being. If she realizes that whenever he expects her to do something, it will be something that she will be capable of doing, then she will be able to trust his demands and his expectations, and then she'll be able to be submissive and devoted and loving toward him, right? Men will not be able to trust women's caving to men on a societal level until it has been in place. This is kind of a different topic. Men are not going to be able to trust women caving to men until it's been in place for a while, 10 to 20 years or something maybe. Unless like an economic collapse happens, and then, the hardship of the economic collapse, of the economic depression will fast track the process of gaining trust from men being able to trust women again, right? In a time of hardships, you can become closer to someone than would otherwise be the case. You can, learn to trust them a lot more than would normally be the case. You can become very close to someone in a month if you share hardships together and are given the opportunity to be there for each other. You could become much closer to someone in a month of hardship than you can become close to someone in 2 years of good times. Hardships are actually a blessing in disguise, because they show you reality. They show you who you can really trust, etc. Right? You may be married and you may think that you have the perfect marriage, but then if you lose your job and you have to get a new job making a lot less money, and then you'll find out if your wife really loves you or not. If she does not really love you, then her attitude toward you will change, and your marriage will not be as good now that you're making less money, right? But if she loves you just as much, even after you're making less money, or maybe she loves you even more because the hardship forces her to improve her character, right? Like, if she loves you just as much or more after you're making less money, then you'll know that she truly loves you. But aside from nationwide hardships like another Great Depression, the female gender will have to spend at least a few years regaining men's trust. And that's after they completely cave. Then they'll have to just start the process of getting men's trust back, right? And it'll probably take maybe even more than just a few years. Women need stability more than men do, but men need stability too. And men need to be able to trust someone before they're going to, change their mind or their behavior, right? Women need men to not only be financially stable for her, because he works and she doesn't, but women need men to be emotionally and intellectually stable as well. If a guy acts like he's bipolar, or he changes his mind all the time or whatever, then the woman will not feel safe, will not feel secure, and she will feel like she's trying to stand during a large earthquake, and she finds it impossible to retain her footing, or she'll feel like she's in quicksand, sinking. A man has to be the rock for his woman. He has to be very reliable for her, not just financially, but emotionally, intellectually, sexually, etc. Like, for example, she does not want a guy, she does not want a husband or a boyfriend who's going to, not have sex with her for months, and then all of a sudden start having sex with her 4 times a day, every day, for weeks straight, and then stop completely, and then not have sex with her for many more months. She wants consistency, reliability, stability. Women prefer a nice, comfortable routine. They greatly prefer that. As long as it's not too boring or whatever, right? But, that's part of that whole boringness that they complain about is actually just female entitlement. So even that is not really a problem once you break their will. then they'll appreciate the boring routine of everything being comfortable and nice, right? They want a nice, comfortable routine, women do. They get up at the same time every workday. They have sex. They like it when the guy gets up at the same time for work every day, when he has sex with her about the same number of times each week, when his mood is pretty constant, pretty stable, pretty reliable, when he's calm, patient, but also compassionate and affectionate. But, of course, you won't like it if he's calm and patient but emotionally cold. Women need affection from their man, especially affection other than sex. Sex is not a substitute for affection, but basically that's how it is. A woman needs a man to be stable in every way because she herself is not stable in any way. She's not financially stable, she's not emotionally stable, she's not even sexually stable. Because women often will have like a mood or whatever, like in that movie Eyes Wide Shut, when his wife, Tom Cruise's character's wife, reveals to him that that she's not as stable as he thinks, right? Like he thinks that she's that she's totally reliable and he knows she would never cheat on him. But then when she says that to him, when he says that to her, she laughs her ass off. You should see that movie. It's so true. She laughs and laughs and laughs. They're smoking pot, but the laughing is not because of the pot. It's because she realizes how ridiculous his delusion about her faithfulness is. And then she admits that this one time they were on vacation or something, and then she saw this naval officer and she instantly fell in love with him and was willing to, if he wanted her for the night, she would give up her husband and her child and everything just to be with this guy for the night. She admits this to him, right? That she had that feeling. And then the next day she woke up in a panic, but she didn't know whether the panic was because the guy was gone and that therefore she wouldn't have the chance to sleep with him, or whether she was, panicked because of what had happened the other day, and she's relieved that he's gone, right? She didn't even know what her feelings were, right? So women are totally unreliable, sexually unreliable, even faithfulness unreliable, right? So, except for unless you take their virginity. Then, if they're the right kind of woman, maybe 30 to 70% of women are faithful if you take their virginity, right? But most women these days are not virgins, so they're completely sexually unstable. You can't trust them. You can't trust their faithfulness at all, right? Her sexual cycle is unstable. Her fertile cycle is a monthly cycle, a lunar cycle, whereas a man's sexual cycle is a yearly cycle. A solar cycle, not a lunar cycle. It's an annual cycle. So even a man's sexual cycle is far more reliable than her. It's a more long-term cycle than hers. And thus a man is hornier in spring and summer than in fall and winter. Whereas a woman may be not horny, is not horny during a certain time of every month, right? So a man's sexual appetite changes far slower than a woman's sexual appetite. A woman can be super horny one day and then not horny at all a few days later because of her lunar cycle. Her cycle changing so fast. But men are not like that. So men are, in every way, more stable than women, more reliable than women. And women need that stability from men. And if men do not possess that stability, then women have problems trusting in that man, being devoted to that man, being faithful to that man, etc. And thus, if a man wants his woman to be faithful to him, he has to be a stable person, stable in multiple ways, not just financially. Because of the decrease of morality in our society, the decrease of honor in our society, the result is that men these days are not anywhere near as reliable as they were in the 1940s. So if men want women to change and be faithful and devoted, then men have to start becoming reliable again. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make excuses for female infidelity. I'm not trying to do that at all. Fuck anybody who's unfaithful. They need to die. They all deserve a bullet in the head if they cheat on their wife or husband. Any woman who cheats on her boyfriend or husband should be killed. It's that simple. And I'm not even really blaming those men for their girlfriends or wives' cheating, although male behavior often does play a part in whether a woman wants to cheat or not, but I am saying the men are not pulling their weight in society like men used to, back 80 to 100 years ago. Women are pulling almost none of the weight that they should be pulling, but men, at least Western men, are only pulling part of the weight that they should be pulling. Although, why should we pull all of our weight when women aren't even pulling any of their weight, right? But actually, men started neglecting pulling all their weight in society way back in the 60s and 70s, when they started taking women up on their offer of, consequence-free sex, premarital sex, promiscuity, and all the rest of it, right? So men have been fucking up for decades too. And so men definitely deserve some of the blame. But regarding the stability thing, the stability issue goes both ways. And women are the ones who have been screwing up way bigger than men, in a sense. And thus women are the ones who are going to have to become more moral, more stable, etc. And will have to prove to men in a big way that they have changed, and that they will never again take government's side against men, and that they, women, will never be rebellious toward men again, and that they, women, will never again believe in female equality, and that they, women, will never again cheat on men, and that they, women, will never again be entitled. Women are going to have to prove all of that to men. Of course, female nature won't change until we genetically engineer women to be nawalts, but we must gain this unconditional surrender, and we must allow women to have an out, a way of proving to men that we will take them back. Because if we don't offer them that light at the end of the tunnel, like me and Zeitgeist Eater say, although I'm not sure if when this video is released, I will have already released the original video that I made before Zeitgeist Eater made his videos, although I didn't release them. But I'm just saying, like, me and Zeitgeist Eater had that same idea, that same insight at the same time, roughly, both before we released videos on it, right? And that insight is that we are going to have to offer women a light at the end of the tunnel, or else they're just going to turn back to government, just like me and Zeitgeist Eater are warning, right? They're going to stop trying to appease men, and they will assist the government in enslaving men 10 times, 100 times worse than men are currently enslaved. That is what is going to happen if men don't offer women a light at the end of the tunnel, in terms of, like, you know, if you cave, ladies, then we will take you back. If MGTOW men really say, go ahead, cave, we're not going to take you back no matter what. If MGTOW men all say that, and most men go MGTOW, then women will turn to government, and then we will really be screwed. Because then we'll not only be divided against women, but women will be supporting government. Women will be the stormtroopers of the government. Not in just an indirect way, but in a direct way. And then we will really be screwed. So we have to offer women a light at the end of the tunnel. Although I say that we need to make it clear to women that the light at the end of the tunnel is after government gets abolished. You know, we will take you ladies back if you help us institute anarcho-capitalism. And I shouldn't even say institute, because anarcho-capitalism is not a thing that can be instituted. It's just the free market naturally arising in the absence of any government. Because trade and honest money and all these things naturally arise when you have no government. So abolish government, and then anarcho-capitalism would arise within a few years. You see, because when people instantly start trading, using honest money, innovating, starting their own businesses, etc., it'll probably only take 5 to 10 years before America would go from a hellish, chaos of no government to being the most prosperous country in the whole world by a huge margin. That is what would happen if we abolish government. So we need to tell women, if you want the prosperity for us to be able to marry you and give you kids, and if you want us to not hate you anymore, and if you want us to be able to trust you because there being no misandric laws, the only way that all that's going to happen is if we have anarcho-capitalism. So we will take you ladies back, but only after you help us abolish the government completely so that we have anarcho-capitalism. You know, if we tell women that, then that's what I think we should be telling women. Men must get women back on their side without compromising with women. And men can do this by men walking away en masse while simultaneously leaving women a light at the end of the tunnel, an option for getting men back. That is, completely surrender all of their rights, all of their freedoms, all of their self-sovereignty. If a large percentage of men walk away from women and say that they will take women back, but only if women consider themselves property again, consider themselves as without free will again, as without freedom again, and if men make it clear to women that if women do this, then men will not abuse women, but will set strict standards for behavior that will make women good people again, good people who are worthy of having a husband and being able to pass on their genes, good people who are worthy of having kids, good people who are worthy of being treated with love and affection, who are being treated well by men. You know, if men make this clear to women, then women must, if men make this clear to women, the women must cave completely, and that if they do cave completely and give up all their rights and allow men to remold them how men see fit, then men will shape women into being good people, and women will not only be worthy of a husband and having kids, but women will also be far happier due to being forced to be far more virtuous. You know, if men make that clear to women, then women will take men up on that offer. When men make all this clear to women, while simultaneously walking away until women accept the ultimatum, then men will be able to get women to cave. We'll be able to get women to get back on men's side. We'll be able to get women to choose men instead of the government. But as a condition of men taking women back, men also need to make it absolutely clear that this ultimatum is not one that we expect women to capitulate to within our lifetimes. And thus, if they want to surprise us by caving in the next few years, then great. But if they do not, if they do not surprise us, if they do what we expect them to do, and they cave slowly, slowly, very gradually, like they're starting to do, and they just continue to super gradually cave, if they do it as slowly and gradually as possible, then we're not going to bend. We're not going to bend, and we're instead just going to remain MGTOW for the rest of our lives, and we'll be happy to do so, and we will revel in all the misery that women bring upon themselves by refusing to capitulate to men's reasonable demands. Like, men make the reasonable demand that women, help us abolish government, and so that we can have no more misandric laws, and so that we can have freedom and peace and prosperity and all the rest of it. And if women don't want to do that, if women want to continue saying, no, we need a government, then fuck them. They're gonna end up cat ladies, and we'll mock them for it. We will say, I love it when I see a cat lady. It is gratifying to me because she deserves it. Men will be reveling in all the misery that women bring upon themselves when women refuse to capitulate to men's reasonable demands. Men and women are not a dream team, as a couple of women like Georgia Free have said. Or if men and women were a dream team throughout history, then it was only because men had the power and authority to use physical force against women to keep women in line, and there were no misandric laws. Women were faithful. Women maintained their virginity until their wedding night. Women let men make all the decisions. Women backed men up, supported their husbands. Women were not allowed to divorce men without a very good reason, like infidelity. Women could be slapped or spanked if they mistreated their husband by insulting him or yelling at him or whatever. Women these days, women like Georgia Free, pretend that men and women can be a perfect match again, but without men getting their rightful authority back and without women having to adhere to certain standards, like virginity before marriage. And the inability to divorce her husband without an extremely that's another one. The inability to divorce her husband without an extremely good reason, such as him not providing enough food for the family or him cheating on his wife. Women couldn't divorce their husband without a really good reason in the past. But women like Georgia Free and others like her think they want to pretend that men and women can be a dream team again. We don't have to repeal any misandric laws. We don't have to change female behavior. All we have to do is just stop being total bitches who support third wave feminism. That's all we need to do. That is total bullshit. Men must be given back their rightful authority, and women have to radically change. Radically. Or else, it's just not going to work. We won't be a dream team again, and men will not be willing to give up their provision and their rights just to make women happy by giving them a husband and kids. It's not going to happen. MGTOW is just going to get bigger and bigger because men do not like getting abused for no reason, and men have been getting abused. Men have been getting divorce raped by the millions over the last several decades by women, and men have had enough, and men are not going to deal with it anymore. So men and women cannot be a dream team again until major changes happen, both in the law and in women. Men and women will never be a dream team again until women give up all their rights. And women will not give up all their rights until MGTOW gets a lot bigger, and or society gets a lot poorer, so that hardly any men can afford a wife and children. Whether those men are red pill or blue pill. Increasing poverty will accomplish the same thing, because women will be blaming men and government, and men will be blaming women and government. But women will also be listening to men, and men will be telling women why they are to blame, why they are to blame for, the situation, because women voted for big government, women voted for welfare, women wasted their money and didn't buy gold, women divorced their husbands and made their husbands and themselves and their kids all screwed up and poor. And women will have few good reasons to support their assertion that men are to blame. And men will be enraged at women turning a much huger percentage of men into incels, and thus men will be demonizing women, and men will be giving very good reasons for why women are to blame. And thus women will want to get back in men's good graces, even if it's only 20 million incel men in society raging at women. I say only 20 million incel men. I mean, that's a huge number, but considering we have, 325 million people or something like that in America, that's a pretty small percentage of the population. I mean, it's big in terms of effect, but it's small in terms of how many people are in the country, right? And that could happen. We could have 20 million incel men in, 10 or 20 years if we have a Great Depression and then we have another, New Deal to try to fix the problem. And it, of course, just like the New Deal, it'll make things worse instead of, doing what it should do, that is make government smaller so that we can once again get prosperity back. So when we have mass poverty like that from a Great Depression and the government's incompetent, backfiring ways of trying to fix the problem, that'll just create tons and tons and tons of incels. And so, those incels will be raging at women, and women will want to get back in men's good graces. Because women will then start to realize that, holy shit, these men should not be incels. These men are quality men. A lot of them are. And thus, this is totally fucked up. We're losing all the men who we want to marry. What do we do? Right? And so they're going to have to start listening to men when men are making the argument and are making the assertions that women are to blame and are saying why women are to blame. Then women will start accepting the blame and will say, yes, it's our fault, we're sorry, we didn't know what we were doing, take back all the power, take back all our rights, tell us what to do. Women will start saying that, and then we will start to be able to shape their behavior, and then we'll be able to fix the problem. But only after they cave like that. Women will accept men's assessment of the problem, that female freedom is to blame, the government is to blame, the modern women are trash, that equality is total bullshit, etc. And thus women will cave in order to give men the power to get both women and government under control again, so that women can live in a safe, prosperous society again, so that women can get married and have kids again. And women will give up everything to be able to get married and have kids again. All their rights. They'll even give up their devotion to Big Daddy government, the ultimate alpha. They'll even turn on government so that they can get married and have kids. If that's the cost of getting married and having kids, they will do that. And so even just increasing poverty and increasing inceldom will greatly help men in taking back power from women, and probably taking back power from government too. Because once women are united with men, and most of the country wants the government eliminated, and most of the country wants the multinational corporations broken up or greatly restricted in power, then men will be able to accomplish that. Because the only resistance then will be from the enemy, the government and the corporations, not from other men of the 99%, and not from women of the 99%. So men will not love women again until women have proven over a long period of time that they can be trusted. That they can be trusted to be faithful, generous, loving, as well as proving that women can be trusted to condemn any other women who act badly. In other words, once women as a whole, or at least a whole new young generation of women, prove that they can take men's side instead of the sisterhood's side. Once women have sufficiently proven to men that they can use their own group preference to shame other women into acting properly again. Once women have sufficiently proven to men that they can take men's side instead of the side of other women. That they can make the sisterhood standards be men's standards for female behavior, so that women's own group preference once again works in men's favor by helping keep women in line with male standards for female behavior. Once women prove that they are willing en masse to support men and let men determine the standards for what is acceptable female behavior and what is unacceptable female behavior. And once women are no longer listening to the corporate and government propaganda regarding feminism and egalitarianism and representation of females in certain fields, and being okay with premarital sex and all that other bullshit. Once women prove to men that they are no longer listening to the propaganda and are instead only listening to men and are making their standard for which women they making their standard for which women they shame be men's standard. Once women are shaming women on men's, standards for what is proper female behavior and what is not, then women will start proving to men that they're on the right side now, and that women can be trusted a little bit again, right? Once women are shaming other women for having sex outside of marriage, not just infidelity, but premarital sex too. Once women are shaming women for engaging in premarital sex, once women are shaming other women for working, once women are shaming other women for wearing clothes that show skin, once women are shaming other women for swearing, cursing, once women are shaming other women for talking back to men, in other words, for arguing with men, once women are shaming other women for going after guys for their money, once women are shaming women for supporting the government, once women are shaming other women for voting, once women are shaming other women for using banks, once women are shaming other women for not advocating for anarcho-capitalism, then, when that has happened, then women will have begun the process of only starting to win back men's trust. And then after several years, maybe, 5, 10, 15 years of this, men will finally take women back, while doing so in a way that makes it so that she cannot go back on her word, and that she cannot get any alimony or palimony or child support or anything from him. He could have a child with his and her DNA, his girlfriend's DNA, and could do so in a surrogate. And he could have his mother, he could have the mother of his child, his girlfriend, he could have her sign away all rights to her extracted egg beforehand. So him and his girlfriend sign a contract that allows her to, that gives his egg, that gives her egg to him, and he gives her some money, maybe, for example, in exchange for it. Or it's in the contract that it's the gift or something for no purpose whatsoever. It's just a token or whatever, right? So she gives him the egg or sells him the egg for very little money, maybe $1. And then he has her egg as his sole legal property now, right? And then he takes the egg and he combines it with his sperm and puts, at a genetic place. He takes her egg, puts it, has it extracted, they hold it at the gene place, and then he gives them his sperm, and then they combine it. And then they put it in a surrogate for him. And then the surrogate signs over the child to him. And so then he has a child by him and his girlfriend, but it's a child that is completely his. He has total legal rights to the child. And his and his girlfriend, whose child it is, has no legal right to her child. Because the egg was given away or sold to the man before he ever even combined it with his sperm. Much less when he actually put it in a surrogate, So the mother has no legal rights to the child, so she cannot take his child that he has with her away from him. And then they could live in separate residences, him and his girlfriend, so that she cannot get palimony from him if they break up. Men could take women back like this, but only after several years of women using their own group preference to keep other women under control and turn women against government. And by the way, I don't know if I say this in this video or another video, but forgive me if I repeat this later on in this video, as I get down further in the script that I can't see because it's too far down. But the guy could not let her see the child every day either, so she wouldn't be able to claim that she's the mother figure or the primary caregiver anyway, right? So not only would they be living separately, but his child that he has full legal rights to would be living with him alone. And when she wanted to see him, when she wanted to see the kid, she would have to come to her boyfriend's house, the man who she had the child with. And then she would only be able to see her child maybe 3 or 4 times a week, right? So this would also keep her from being able to take the child from him in a divorce. Not a divorce, but a breakup of the relationship, right? So this is something that I think could possibly work. Once nearly all women are opposed to the very existence of government, and once those women have been that way for several years, then men should probably take women back in a legally safe way, in a way that is legally safe for the men to do, and then not enslave themselves to their woman either. If she wants a child, he should probably wait until she is near the end of her fertility. Let's say 35 years old. Let's say 34, 33, 36, around there. If he waits until she's that old before he gives her a child, that way, if she cheats, it will be soon, because of her being influenced by her biological imperative. And if she does not cheat, then she won't cheat at all, ever, because she won't have anything to offer to a new guy, because her fertility and beauty are already over, right? And if she wants 2 or 3 kids, he should be the only one. If she wants 2 or 3 kids, he should only have 1 child with her, because the more money he is able to keep in his pocket, the less he has to work, and the more he can build his wealth, and the more he can stay free and use his wealth and freedom to stay educated and fund things that oppose the government, things like the MGTOW mirror, and the more he can actually be a father to his child, etc. So, if guys are going to take women back, even in this limited capacity that is safe for men to do, men should still only have 1 child with the woman. Even if she wants to have 2 or 3, he should only have 1 with her, because that allows him to get more money, be a better father to his kid. And you see, the more he works, the more she might be able to claim that she's actually the primary caregiver, even though they live in separate residences and his kid lives with him, right? But if they live in separate residences and the father does not work very much, then he can easily claim to be the primary caregiver, and the woman would not be able to take the kid away from him, right? So this is important to say, I think. And I say that the MGTOW mirror opposes the government because it is a way of keeping free speech alive, keeping truth alive, keeping knowledge about female nature and sound money alive. And those principles are critical to keeping government from growing further out of control. Free speech is absolutely essential, just like Zeitgeist Eater has said. It is the right that all other rights flow from, which is something I did not properly appreciate at all until I heard Zeitgeist Eater say it many times, and then I gave it some thought, and then I realized that, yeah, he's actually right there. He's correct about that. That's an important point that more people need to make and talk about, right? Because if you cannot spread knowledge to other people because of censorship, then how the hell are you going to amass a bunch of people to oppose some form of tyranny that is being forced on the citizens of the country? Without free speech, there is no freedom of any kind. Without freedom of speech, there's no ability to change things, there's no ability to educate people, there's no ability to amass mass protests to get change. Without freedom of speech, there would have been able to be no civil rights movement, no anything, right? Freedom of speech is the one that changes everything, right? So you have to preserve freedom of speech, and it's under massive attack, right? Without freedom of speech, there's no ability to change things, and there'll never be freedom, because tyranny will just endlessly increase if there's no freedom of speech. The less the man allows himself to be a plow horse by not having more kids than he can comfortably afford, the more he can raise his kids, thus making sure that his sons are masculine and educated and honorable and moral and aggressive and hardworking, and the more he can assure that his daughters remain virgins until they can find the guy that they're going to spend the rest of their life with, and that his daughters not just maintain their virginity, but that they are also hardworking, as well as supportive, submissive, quiet, obedient, refined, loving, and sweet. Then once men have got women on their side completely by going MGTOW until women cave, once all women are advocating, like men are, that we need anarcho-capitalism, then we can overthrow the government. Because most people in the country will be united in wanting to overthrow the government. Then the government can be overthrown by economics instead of physical warfare, although government would probably try to stop the outflow of wealth so as to keep itself from starving from lack of tax dollars and lack of stolen purchasing power. But once men have power like this again, then if men have the balls, men will be able to overthrow the government with violence if it becomes necessary. And if it doesn't become necessary to use violence because of government being unable to stop men from using cryptocurrency instead of the dollar, then this means that men will still overthrow the government with women's help, and will do so without violence. It's all very simple. To have freedom and prosperity again, we need to overthrow government. To overthrow the government, we need to both avoid becoming enslaved to women, and we also need to get women on our side again. Going MGTOW while also telling women that we will take them back if they offer us a complete surrender, and if they change their views, and if they stop favoring each other over men, and if they stop favoring government, and if they stop approving of the existence of government, and start instead strongly advocating that we have anarcho-capitalism again. If men do that, go MGTOW while making demands, and if women cave and start doing those things, and if women do those things for long enough that we can trust them again, at least a little bit, then we should take them back in a way that remains safe for us, and do so that we can unite the 99% of the country against the tyrannical, thieving, genocidal government and the tyrannical, propagandizing, psychotic multinational corporations. Then we can overthrow the government to bring the corporations to heel, and then we can once again have freedom, peace, prosperity, fast technological progress, and virtuous women who are actually a helpful asset to their man's life instead of a burden. But it's all about trust. You cannot trust someone if you have no power over them, especially if they have proven themselves to be untrustworthy in the past. The only way to trust such a person is for you to have power over them so that they cannot hurt you again, or so that they will be punished severely if they do hurt you again. This is the only way to trust such a person. Well, women are that way. They have been divorce raping us for the last several decades, and thus we cannot trust them anymore. And thus we need to make it very clear to them that the only way that we can trust them again, and thus the only way that we can take them back, is if they stop working, stop voting, stop having premarital sex, stop supporting the very existence of government, and start supporting anarcho-capitalism instead, etc. Then, when women do these things and allow themselves to always be put in a position of having no power in relation to men, then men can take women back in a way, albeit in a way that does not allow women to have any leverage over men, such as what I was talking about earlier. Men having kids with women in a way that gives full legal custody of the kid to the man, because he owned the kid from the very beginning, because it was done by surrogacy and the woman signing over rights to her egg beforehand. And men and the men and women living in different residences, and the woman only getting to see her kid 3 or 4 times a week. If we do these things, then men will be able to trust women a little bit again, and that'll be fine. Right? Men need to make it clear to women that women can either trust men again and provide a good moral example that men can reciprocally emulate, because men have been setting a good moral example, at least in some ways, for a few decades now, and women have not been following the example. Or you could say that women have been following the bad moral example of the top 1% of men. Or women can end up childless and alone. Those are the options, right? Women can start... women can either trust men again and provide a good moral example that men can reciprocally emulate, or women can end up childless and alone. And I think I know which option women are going to choose. Women can trust men again, or women can end up childless or alone. But the only way that they're getting a relationship and kids is if it is legally safe for a man to do so. That is, if they don't cohabitate, if they don't have kids, unless it's by surrogacy, like I described earlier, or if we overthrow the government and then it's safe to have kids with a woman, it's safe to marry again, because then there's no more contracts, right? Or it's smart contracts on a blockchain that is no mediation by a human being, right? We men need to make it so that women are forced to choose between trusting a man to not leave her when she loses her looks, in other words, agreeing to be with him without any kind of government guarantee that she will get anything if he dumps her when she loses her looks. She can either agree to that, or she can have short-term relationships with a lot of men until she loses her fertility, and then not only end up without a man for life, but end up without any kids either, right? Men need to make women choose between, on the one hand, the government guarantee of a lifetime of provision, in other words, marriage and or cohabitation, and on the other hand, having kids. That is, if she wants to hold out for a lifetime of provision and marriage under a misandric marriage contract, then she's going to end up having no kids. Or if she wants to give up on marriage and give up on cohabitation and give up on supporting government, then she'll be able to have kids. Because a man will set up the arrangement so that he'll have kids with her in a legally safe way, like I was talking about earlier. Those are going to be her choices as MGTOW gets bigger and bigger. She'll have to choose. Either she can hold out for marriage and likely not find it, or she can settle for a relationship where she has no legal claim on the man and or his money and does not live with him and only gets to see her kid that she has with him by surrogate a few times a week, maybe 4 times a week. The kid being with the father or with a live-in male friend for the man's a live-in male friend that the father is friends with, right? That other man who lives with the father will be like the babysitter the rest of the time when the kid is not with the mother, right? And the one kid would only be with the mother, never at her house, never at her apartment, but only at the father's apartment, and only when the girlfriend is visiting her daughter or son, and only when the woman is visiting when the father is also there, right? Because he couldn't let her visit and take care of the kid when he's at work, or else she would be able to, break up with him and then go to the court and claim that she's primary caregiver because she looks after the kid when he's at work, right? So he couldn't let her see the kid then either. The father would only be able to let her see, the boyfriend would only be able to let her see her kid when he's at home after work, right? And only a few times a week, right? Women are going to have to settle for this, or they're going to have to help us overthrow the government. Those are the only 2 ways they're going to get what they want as MGTOW gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And since she won't be able to find a husband anyway, she'll be forced to cave, right? Forced to accept a relationship that is not legal and that does not afford her any ability to get any money if they break up, and that does not afford her any ability to take her child with her if she leaves her man. She will be forced to accept such a setup, because if she doesn't, then she won't be able to find a man to marry her, because all the rich men cheat and refuse to marry, because MGTOW will have set the example and converted all rich men into being MGTOW, because rich men will not want to be shown up by the lower class men who have gone MGTOW. They won't want to look stupid, right? And marriage is a sham anyway. So once the majority of men are no longer falling for it, majority of men in society, these rich men and the Hollywood types and all the rest of them, they get married. And part of it is probably delusion because they believe in love and they believe in female faithfulness and whatnot. But also a lot of it is they just want to get married just because, or they even just want to get married to, propagandize marriage, right? Because they're part of the Illuminati, right? And they know that they'll cheat on their wife when they get married, after they get married, right? So once the propaganda for marriage, rich men getting married and Hollywood types getting married, once it's not affecting men and men are no longer marrying, the propaganda's not working, then those men will just stop getting married. And then that'll back up MGTOW even more. It'll prove to women that men really don't want to marry. They really have no interest in it and they have no reason to, right? And then women will start opposing government and or the misandric laws, right? So she won't be able to find a rich man to marry her, and she won't be able to find a high-class guy to marry her. She won't be able to find a religious guy to marry her. And high-class guys are not necessarily rich, right? She won't be able to find a religious guy to marry her. She will have to settle for a middle-class guy. And a middle-class guy of her same sexual marketplace value will not date her, will not be serious with her unless she is willing to take marriage completely off the table. And unless she is completely willing to let him be 100% the boss in the relationship. Unless, she's willing to be completely obedient to him. And she won't get what she wants. He won't be serious with her. This middle-class guy of her same sexual marketplace value will not be serious with her unless she also is willing to give him full legal rights over the one child that he will have with her by surrogate. Instead of facing a lifetime of short-term relationships or a lifetime of being pumped and dumped or a lifetime of having to work for until she's 65 or 70, a lifetime of being a cat lady, a lifetime of misery, right? Instead of this, women will absolutely want to cave and agree to take marriage completely off the table and be willing to take having a child the natural way completely off the table and will be willing to take cohabitation completely off the table. Such women will be forced to take what they can get. And if it means that a woman's man spends 2 or 3 evenings per week at her apartment or at her parents' house after he gets off work so that he can spend time with her because he can't afford a second apartment for her and she can't afford an apartment for herself because all men demand that no women work, so she has to live with her parents, and he can't marry her, and he can't cohabitate with her because the law is misandric, so she'll have to stay with her at her parents' house, right? And if that means that she gets love and sex from a man and maybe a child too, then she'll be willing to do that, right? Just look at immigrants. They all live together with their 2 or 3 generations all in the same house, right? White women in America will start doing that too once men start demanding it of them. So that men can stay in a legally safe position by not cohabitating with them, right? And if it means she'll get societal respect for being such a woman, and if it means that she'll get the respect and love and guidance of her man for being obedient and adhering to his rules, then the result will be her accepting such an arrangement. And the more common such an arrangement becomes, the easier it will be for not only men to get women to accept such an arrangement, but the easier it will also be for women to think of such an arrangement as normal, instead of, what they would consider to be today, which is they would today consider that to be, beyond the pale, insane and offensive. But their views will change, and radically, once MGTOW gets much bigger and men make these demands. This has been Redshift. I hope you got something out of this video. Peace, trucks.